Most people think the worst psychiatric experiments happened in secret government bunkers or hidden military labs. That is not where they happened. They happened at McGill University in Montreal, in a converted mansion on Mount Royal, under the supervision of the most decorated psychiatrist in North America. The patients were not prisoners. They were middle-class women who checked themselves in for help with depression and anxiety. They trusted their doctor. He had every credential you could possibly have, and he erased their minds on purpose. In 1953, Dr. Ewan Cameron became president of the American Psychiatric Association. That same year, he also led the World Psychiatric Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Nobody in the history of psychiatry had ever held all three positions at once. When a family doctor in Montreal had a patient who was not getting better, Cameron was where they sent them. He was not some fringe experimenter. He was the system. He ran the Allen Memorial Institute, which looked more like a private clinic than an asylum. Families paid for treatment there. They believed they were getting the best care available. Cameron had been a psychiatric evaluator at the Nuremberg trials in 1945. He sat in that courtroom and assessed the mental state of Nazi doctors who had done unspeakable things to their prisoners. Most people assumed that experience would make him more careful, more ethical, more aware of where medicine could go wrong. It did the opposite. He looked at the totalizing control those experiments represented and thought the problem was not the approach. The problem was the intention. If you applied that level of control with good intentions, you could actually cure mental illness. You could break a sick mind down completely and rebuild it healthy. He called his method de-patterning. The theory was simple. Mental illness is a pattern of thought and behavior. If you could erase the pattern entirely, you could write a new one. You could take someone suffering from depression or anxiety, wipe their personality clean like a chalkboard, and reinstall a healthier version of themselves. He genuinely believed this. He published papers about it. He taught residents at McGill how to do it. And starting in 1957, he began testing it on patients who came to him for help. The patients were not told what was actually going to happen to them. They were told they were receiving advanced sleep therapy. They signed consent forms that said nothing about what Cameron was planning. These were not people committed against their will. These were mothers and wives and working women who had been referred by their family doctors. Many were admitted for postpartum depression, some for anxiety after a divorce. The kinds of problems that today might be treated with therapy and medication. Cameron saw them as opportunities. Here is what the treatment actually involved. Patients were placed in drug-induced comas using combinations of barbiturates and other sedatives. They were kept unconscious for weeks at a time, 15 days, 30 days, in some cases, 65 days straight. While they were under, Cameron administered electroshock therapy, but not the standard version. Normal electroshock in the 1950s was 110 volts once per session. Cameron used up to 150 volts. He did it 2 or 3 times every single day. Some patients received over 100 electroshock treatments during a single stay. Their brains were being hit with massive electrical current over and over, while they were unconscious and could not consent or resist. Then came the psychic driving. Cameron fitted patients with helmets that had speakers built in. He placed them in isolation rooms with no windows. The rooms were called the sleep rooms. While the patients were unconscious or barely conscious, tape-recorded messages played on loop. 16 hours a day, sometimes for months. The messages were either the patient's own voices recorded during therapy sessions where they talked about their problems, or they were scripts Cameron wrote telling them how to think and feel. The same sentences, over and over. Tens of thousands of repetitions. Cameron kept detailed records of all of this. He published his results in academic journals. He was not hiding what he was doing. He presented his findings at psychiatric conferences. Other doctors questioned whether it worked. Almost none of them questioned whether it was ethical, because Cameron was not some rogue doctor in a basement. He was the president of the American Psychiatric Association, If he said this was advanced treatment, the assumption was that he knew what he was doing. In 1957, the CIA started funding his work. They gave him money through a front organization called the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. The funding came from MKUltra, the CIA program, searching for mind control techniques. They thought Cameron might help them figure out how to break enemy agents or reverse Soviet brainwashing. Cameron did not care about that. He wanted the money to keep testing his theory. He believed he was healing people. The CIA wrote him checks for over $60,000, more than $500,000 in today's money, and he kept going. You need to understand what came out of those treatment rooms. A woman named Madeline Smith went into the Allen Memorial in 1959 with postpartum depression. She had just had her third child. She was exhausted and sad, and her doctor told her Cameron could help. 6 months later, she came home and did not recognize her children. She did not know their names. She did not remember giving birth to any of them. Her husband had to teach her how to use a toilet again. She was 32 years old, and she had the mind of a 5-year-old. Cameron wrote in his notes that her de-patterning was successful. The slate was clean. He considered it progress. That was not rare. That was the pattern. Women went in for anxiety or mild depression and came out unable to feed themselves. One patient forgot how to cook, not just recipes. She did not know what a stove was or what it was for. Another woman became incontinent and never recovered control. These were not side effects Cameron was trying to avoid. This was the goal. He called it achieving baseline. You had to erase everything before you could rebuild. The problem was the rebuilding almost never worked. Cameron kept patients in those drug-induced comas for 15 days minimum. Some stayed under for 65 days straight. Your brain was not meant to be unconscious that long. While they were under, he hit them with electroshock over and over. Standard treatment at the time was 1 shock per session at 110 volts. Cameron used 150 volts. He did it 2 or 3 times every day. One patient received more than 100 shocks during her stay. Her name was Mary Morrow. She went in for anxiety. She came out not knowing who she was. The psychic driving made it worse. Cameron put helmets on patients with speakers inside. He locked them in windowless rooms he called the sleep rooms. Then he played recordings on loop, 16 hours a day, for weeks, sometimes months. The recordings were either the patient talking about their problems, pulled from the therapy sessions they thought were private, or scripts Cameron wrote, simple phrases. You are calm, you are happy, your anxiety is gone. The same. Sentences tens of thousands of times, while the patient drifted in and out of consciousness, their brain still recovering from the shocks. One recording said the same sentence 40,000 times in a row. 40,000. The human brain is not built for that. Cameron believed repetition could rewrite thought patterns the way you reprogram a machine. He was treating minds like hard drives you could wipe and reinstall. But people are not machines. When you erase a person that completely, they do not come back. Here's what nobody talks about. Cameron was not some underground doctor doing this in secret. He published everything. He wrote papers about de-patterning and presented them at conferences. Other psychiatrists read his work. They knew what he was doing. Some of them criticized the method because it did not work, not because it was wrong. The assumption was that if the president of the American Psychiatric Association said this was treatment, then it was treatment. His credentials protected him more than any cover-up ever could, and the CIA kept paying him. From 1957 to 1964, they funneled money to Cameron through something called the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. It was a front group. Cameron did not know the money came from the CIA at first, but he knew it came from somewhere connected to government intelligence. He did not ask too many questions. The CIA gave him over $60,000 total. That is more than $500,000 today. They wanted mind control techniques. Cameron wanted funding. It was a transaction, grant proposals, budget approvals, academic language covering what was happening in those rooms. The CIA officer overseeing the funding was named Sidney Gottlieb. He ran MKUltra, the program searching for ways to break enemy agents and reverse brainwashing. Gottlieb read Cameron's proposals personally and approved them. But here is the thing. The CIA did not push Cameron to do this. He was already doing it. They just found him and wrote checks. His ambition came first. Their money came second. Cameron believed he was healing people. He thought he was on the edge of curing mental illness entirely. The CIA thought he might help them win the Cold War. Both of them were wrong, but the patients paid the price. Families started complaining by 1960. They threatened lawsuits. They went to McGill. They went to the medical board in Quebec. Nothing happened. Hospital lawyers settled some cases quietly with money and non-disclosure agreements. Junior staff at the Allen Memorial reported concerns internally. Nurses saw what was happening and told supervisors. Residents training under Cameron questioned the methods. None of it mattered. Cameron was too senior, too decorated, too essential to the reputation of McGill and Canadian psychiatry. Challenging him meant challenging the entire structure, so the structure protected him instead. Cameron retired in 1964, not because he was forced out. He left voluntarily. He was never investigated, never disciplined, never charged. He died in 1967, climbing a mountain, and the obituaries called him a pioneer. McGill kept his work in their archives. The psychiatric community moved on, and the patients he destroyed spent the rest of their lives trying to remember who they had been before he erased them. The truth about what Cameron did not come out when he died. It did not come out when MKUltra was exposed in 1975. It stayed buried for another decade. The families knew, the patients knew, but nobody with power wanted to listen. In 1977, the New York Times published a story about MKUltra and mentioned the Allen Memorial, but it was one paragraph in a long article about CIA programs. Most people missed it. The Canadian government did nothing. McGill said nothing. The story disappeared again. Then, in 1984, a journalist named John Marks published a book called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. He had filed Freedom of Information requests and found CIA documents about Sub-Project 68. He named Cameron. He described the experiments. He listed what happened to the patients. The book got attention but not outrage. People read it like history, something that happened in the past, far away. But the patients were still alive. They were still trying to remember who they had been. A group of them got together in the late 1980s and sued the CIA. Not Cameron because he was dead. Not McGill because the lawyers said that case was too hard. Just the CIA, 9 patients. They wanted the agency to admit what it funded and pay for the damage. The case took years. The CIA fought it. They said Cameron acted independently. They said the agency had no control over what he did. They said the patients could not prove the CIA money directly caused their harm. In 1988, the CIA settled out of court. They paid each patient $100,000. No admission of wrongdoing. No apology. The settlement had a condition. The patients could not talk about the amount publicly. $100,000 for a stolen life, for decades of not knowing your own children. The CIA spent more than that on a single year of funding Cameron. The settlement was cheaper than letting the case go to trial. The agency made the problem go away with money and silence. That is how institutions survive. They outlast the victims. They wait until people are too tired to fight. Then they pay just enough to close the door. The Canadian government did not settle until 1994. They paid lower amounts, around $78,000 per victim. Fewer patients qualified because the government used stricter rules about who counted as harmed. If you could still function at all, you did not qualify. If your memory loss was only partial, you did not qualify. The government treated destroyed lives like a budget line. They calculated the minimum they could pay and still looked like they did something. McGill never paid anyone. The university said Cameron was an independent researcher. They said they were not responsible for his methods. In 2017, more than 50 years after the experiments ended, McGill issued an apology. They said they were sorry. They acknowledged harm was done. They did not offer money. They did not change the name of any buildings. The Allen Memorial Institute still operates. Different people, different methods, same building. You can go there today. Here is what nobody wants you to understand. Cameron was not a monster who tricked the system. He was the system. Every credential he had, the system gave him. Every authority he held, the system granted. When families complained, the system protected him. When staff reported problems, the system ignored them. The system made Cameron untouchable because his reputation was their reputation. Challenging him meant admitting they had elevated someone who destroyed patients in the name of healing them. So, they chose his reputation over the patients. Every single time. The same thing happens now. Different fields, different methods, same logic. Institutions protect power before they protect people. They wait until the person is dead or retired. Then they apologize. Then they say it could never happen again. But it can. It does. Because the thing that let Cameron do what he did for over a decade was not his cruelty. It was his credentials. The system trusted him because the system created him. And the system will always protect itself first. You want to know how ordinary evil works? It works through credentials and committees and institutional prestige. It works because good people assume someone with that much authority must be doing something right. It works because by the time enough people realize what is happening, the person responsible has retired or died, and the institution offers an apology that costs nothing. Cameron destroyed lives and died on a mountain as a respected pioneer. The patients spent decades trying to remember their children's names. That gap between what he got and what they got is how power actually works, not through villains and shadows. Through respected professionals nobody questions until it is far too late.